some games are just for fun, but what if the games you play started playing you? Imagine plugging in a game and hearing your own name whispered from the speakers, or discovering that the shadows in the game are moving in ways they shouldn't, almost like they're watching you. What if a harmless gaming session became a deadly trap, with puzzles that demand more than just your time and levels that blur the line between virtual reality and your own home? From cursed discs bought on a whim, to haunted arcades that demand sacrifices and forbidden levels that lure players into their worst nightmares, these chilling stories of cursed video games are more than just urban legends. They're warnings. Warnings about games that don't just challenge you, but consume you. Games that leave you haunted long after you've logged off. Are you ready to press start on these terrifying tales, or will you leave the controller untouched, wondering what horrors lie just one level deeper? Story 1. The Game That Knew My Name. It started with a voice, a faint whisper from my headphones as I played late at night. But the game I bought on a whim was about to turn my world into a waking nightmare. A few weeks ago, I was wandering through a flea market on the outskirts of town. You know the type. Vendors hawking everything from handmade jewelry to questionably sourced electronics. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just killing time. That's when I saw it. A small table covered in mismatched, dusty items. Behind it sat an older man with sunken eyes and a hunched posture. His table had an assortment of old video games, all in battered cases. I wasn't expecting much, maybe some retro titles or knockoff cartridges, but one case caught my eye. It didn't have any official art or branding, just a black plastic case with a white label stuck to the front. Scrawled across it in shaky, uneven letters was the title, Never Alone. $5, the man rasped when he noticed me staring at it. "What kind of game is it?" I asked, picking up the case. "Something special," he replied with a grin that sent a shiver down my spine. "One of a kind, perfect for late nights." Normally, I'd pass on something this sketchy, but curiosity got the better of me. I handed over the cash and the man dropped the game into a thin plastic bag, muttering, "Enjoy." When I got home that night, I slid the disc into my console. The startup screen was simple, just the game's title in bold white letters against a black background. Never Alone. There was no publisher logo or menu options, just a single button that said, Begin. The game opened with a first-person perspective in a dimly lit room. It looked like a bedroom, maybe a child's. Posters on the walls, toys scattered across the floor, and a single window with heavy curtains. The graphics were basic but oddly unsettling, like the environment had been designed to feel familiar yet off. A tutorial popped up, teaching me how to move, interact, and open doors. The first objective was simple. Find the light. I wandered the house, flashlight in hand, until I found a door slightly ajar. Pushing it open, I entered a long, narrow hallway. Shadows flickered across the walls, and the sound of faint whispering filled my headphones. The first time I heard it, I thought I was imagining things. It was my name. Mike. I froze, my thumb hovering over the joystick. The whispers stopped, replaced by the sound of my character's breathing. "Mike," the voice repeated, clearer this time. I paused the game, yanked off my headphones, and stared at the screen. How could it know my name? My console wasn't connected to the internet, and I hadn't entered any personal information. I chalked it up to some kind of audio coincidence and pressed on. The game got progressively weirder. Doors that I'd already opened would slam shut behind me. The whispers became louder, sometimes overlapping, as though multiple people were speaking at once. But the worst part, the game started to change. By the time I reached the second level, the environment looked eerily familiar. The posters on the walls resembled ones I had in my own bedroom growing up. The furniture arrangement was the same, too. It was unsettling, but I tried to brush it off as a coincidence. Then I entered a room that made my stomach drop. It was my living room. Every detail was exact. The worn-out couch, the coffee table with a chipped corner, the mismatched curtains, even the stack of games on the shelf matched my own collection. I felt my chest tighten as I moved the character forward. A new objective appeared on the screen. Find the stranger. I didn't want to play anymore. I tried to quit the game, but there was no option to exit. The console wouldn't power off either. Frustrated, I decided to finish the level, hoping it would unlock a save point. As I moved through the virtual version of my house, I heard footsteps behind me, soft, deliberate, and growing closer. I turned the character around, but the hallway was empty. "Mike," the voice whispered again. When I reached the final room, my virtual self stopped in front of a mirror. The reflection wasn't the character I had been playing. It was me. My exact face stared back at me from the screen, down to the shirt I was wearing. The reflection blinked, even though I hadn't touched the controls. Then it smiled, a slow, unnerving grin. "You're not supposed to be here," it said in my voice. I ripped the power cord out of the wall, plunging the room into silence. My hands were trembling, my breath shallow. I stared at the blank screen, waiting for something, anything, to happen. That night, I barely slept. Every sound made me jump, every shadow felt alive. I considered throwing the game away, but something stopped me. I don't know if it was fear or morbid curiosity, but I couldn't bring myself to get rid of it. The next evening, I decided to test it one more time. This time, I connected my console to a separate monitor in my office, far away from my living room. When the game booted up, the title screen was different. The words "Never Alone" had been replaced with a single phrase, "Welcome back, Mike." I won't bore you with the details of the next few hours, but the game knew things it shouldn't have. Personal memories, childhood events, secrets I'd never told anyone. It taunted me, lured me deeper into its twisted world, until I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. The final straw came when I received a text message on my phone. It was from an unknown number, and it read, "Look behind you." My heart raced as I turned slowly, half expecting to see something or someone standing there. The room was empty, but when I turned back to the monitor, my reflection was back on the screen. "See you soon," it whispered. I haven't touched the game since. It's still sitting in my office, tucked away in a drawer I never open. But every now and then, I hear faint whispers late at night, coming from somewhere in the house. And sometimes I swear I catch glimpses of movement on that blank monitor, just for a second, like someone's watching me. If you ever see a game called Never Alone, don't pick it up. Don't play it. Some games aren't meant to be played. Some games play you. Story 2. High score, low chance. I thought I was just playing for a high score, but by the time I realized what the game was really about, it was already too late. A few months ago, I stumbled across an abandoned pizza parlor on the outskirts of my town. You've probably seen places like it, faded signs, broken windows, and graffiti scrawled across the walls. It was the kind of building kids dared each other to break into on Halloween. I wasn't planning to go in, but as I passed by, I noticed something unusual through the broken front window. Among the piles of rubble and torn booths was a faint glow, a flickering blue light coming from the back of the restaurant. Curiosity got the best of me. I climbed through the window, careful not to cut myself on the jagged glass. The inside smelled like mildew and old grease, and the floor was littered with trash and broken tiles. The glow was coming from an old arcade machine tucked into a corner. It stood alone, covered in dust, but still powered on. The screen flickered, showing a simple title in blocky blue letters, "Play to Win." I couldn't resist. Something about the machine pulled me in, like it was waiting for me. The controls were surprisingly clean, with a joystick and two buttons that felt smooth to the touch. As soon as I pressed start, the screen changed. A simple maze appeared with a small, pixelated character in the center. The objective was straightforward: collect glowing orbs while avoiding shadowy figures that chased you. The game wasn't groundbreaking, but it was oddly addictive. The longer I played, the faster the shadows moved, and the harder it became to avoid them. I died a few times, but each time I hit retry, the game let me continue from the same level. After about 20 minutes, I noticed something strange. The orbs I was collecting began to display numbers. At first, they seemed random: 123, 456, 789, but then they started to look familiar. One of them was my phone number, another was my birthday. I paused, my finger hovering over the joystick. Was it a coincidence? A creepy Easter egg? I convinced myself it was just a fluke and kept playing. The next level felt different. The maze shifted into something more detailed, more realistic. The walls were no longer simple lines. They looked like corridors from a building I recognized, my old high school. Even the pixelated shadows seemed to take on human forms, their heads tilting as if watching me. When I reached the end of the level, a message flashed across the screen. "You're doing great, my name." My stomach dropped. How did the game know my name? I pulled away from the machine, my heart pounding, but as I turned to leave, the screen flickered again. A new message appeared. "Don't quit now, the high score is within reach." Against my better judgment, I sat back down. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was the competitive streak in me, or maybe it was something deeper, something I couldn't explain. The next few levels became increasingly personal. The corridors turned into places I knew intimately. My childhood home, the park where I used to play, even the coffee shop I visited every morning. The shadows were faster now, more aggressive. Their movements were jerky, almost unnatural, and I could swear I heard faint whispers each time one got too close. Then I reached a level that made my blood run cold. It was the arcade itself. The maze was a perfect replica of the building I was sitting in, down to the broken tiles and graffiti on the walls. My pixelated character moved through the maze, but the shadows weren't chasing me anymore. They were waiting, standing motionless just outside the exit, their heads tilted toward the screen, toward me. I tried to quit the game again, but the exit button was gone. The joystick wouldn't respond, and the machine seemed frozen. I was about to unplug it when the screen changed on its own. One final level. The maze disappeared, replaced by a single room with no walls, just endless black. In the center was a glowing orb, larger than any of the others I'd collected. Beneath it was a message: "Sacrifice to win." I didn't understand. Sacrifice what? I pressed every button, but nothing happened. The only option was to move toward the orb. As my character approached it, another message appeared: "Something you hold dear." I hesitated. Suddenly the machine began to hum, a low, vibrating sound that made my teeth ache. The orb on the screen pulsed in sync with the noise, almost like it was alive. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wallet. It was the first thing that came to mind, the most literal interpretation of the game's demand. I placed it on the machine's surface. Nothing happened. The hum grew louder, more insistent. The screen flashed again. Something more. My hands were shaking as I placed my phone on the machine. Then my keys. Still nothing. The machine seemed to reject each item, its hum rising to a deafening pitch. Finally, a new message appeared: "Your memories." Before I could process what that meant, the screen flickered. Images began to play, scenes from my life. My graduation, my first job, the day I got my dog. They flashed by in rapid succession, faster and faster until I could barely make them out. The joystick moved on its own, guiding my character toward the glowing orb. I tried to pull away, but my hands wouldn't obey. My vision blurred as the machine seemed to pull something out of me, something I couldn't see but could feel. It was like a piece of my soul was being ripped away. When I woke up, I was lying on the floor of the arcade. The machine was gone. At first, I thought it was over. But when I got home, I noticed something was wrong. I couldn't remember my dog's name, or the name of my first teacher, or even my best friend from childhood. Little pieces of my life were missing, like someone had reached into my mind and plucked them out. Every day since, more memories have faded. I've started writing things down, trying to hold on to what's left. But deep down, I know it's only a matter of time. The high score wasn't just a number. It was everything I had. If you ever see an arcade machine glowing in the dark, don't play it. Some games aren't about winning, they're about taking. Story 3, The Beta Tester's Curse. I was paid to play an unreleased game. They didn't tell me I'd be playing for my life. A few months ago, I saw a post on a gaming forum. It was one of those community boards where indie developers looked for testers to try their games before release. Normally, I wouldn't bother, but this one stood out. It promised $500 for just a few hours of gameplay. The only catch? The game had to be played alone with no recordings or streams allowed. It sounded too good to be true, but I was broke and $500 for a night's work was too tempting to pass up. I signed up, filled out a short application, and 2 days later, I got an email. Congratulations, you've been selected. Expect a package within 48 hours. The package arrived sooner than I expected. Inside was a plain black USB drive with no markings and a single sheet of paper. The instructions were brief. Do not play with others present. Do not stop until you reach the end. Do not disconnect your internet during gameplay. It seemed odd, but I didn't think much of it. That night, I plugged the USB drive into my laptop and opened the single file it contained. The Path. The game launched immediately, no installation required. The opening screen was bare, a black background with the words, "Begin the Path," glowing in white. A chill ran down my spine, but I chalked it up to nerves. I clicked Begin, and the screen faded to black. The game started in a dense, shadowy forest. My character, a simple humanoid figure, was standing at the edge of a dirt path. The graphics weren't amazing, but the atmosphere was unnervingly realistic. The trees swayed as if in a real breeze, and the distant sound of rustling leaves felt almost too authentic. The first objective appeared in the corner. Follow the path. As I moved forward, the game began to whisper. Not loud, distinct words, just faint, overlapping murmurs that made my skin crawl. The path was littered with objects, a torn teddy bear, a shattered mirror, an old shoe. Each time I approached one, the screen flickered and the whispers grew louder. At one point, I heard a voice, clear, distinct, and far too close for comfort. "Don't look back." I froze, my finger hovering over the keyboard. It was probably just a scripted moment, I told myself. But the voice sounded so real, like someone had leaned over my shoulder and spoken directly into my ear. Against my better judgment, I turned the character around. The screen glitched violently, the whispers erupting into distorted screams. My laptop's fan roared as if it was struggling to keep up. For a split second, I saw a figure in the distance. A tall, shadowy silhouette with glowing red eyes. Then the game reset itself, dumping me back at the beginning of the path. This time, the objective was different. You were warned. Continue forward. As I played, the game began to change. The forest grew darker, the path narrower. My surroundings felt oppressive, like the walls of the world were closing in. More objects appeared along the way, each one accompanied by a flicker of static and a chilling memory. Memories that weren't mine. A child crying in the dark, a woman screaming, a man begging for forgiveness. I was starting to feel genuinely uneasy. It wasn't just the game, it was the way it felt. like something alive was watching me. Then the whispers returned, this time louder and more coherent. "Do you feel it yet?" I tried to ignore it, focusing on the path. But as I continued, the objects I found became more personal. A photograph of my family, a keychain I had lost years ago, even an old notebook I used to keep in high school. The game wasn't just eerie, it was invasive. By the time I reached the next objective, my heart was racing. The screen displayed a single word: stop. I hesitated, unsure what to do. If I stopped, would the game end? Would I still get paid? But then I noticed something. The reflection on my laptop screen showed a second figure behind me. I spun around in my chair, my breath catching in my throat. The room was empty. When I looked back at the screen, the figure was still there, now closer. Its face was blurry, shifting like static, but its eyes burned red. I wanted to quit. I tried everything, pressing escape, closing the laptop, even holding the power button. Nothing worked. The game seemed locked in, refusing to let go. The next objective appeared: finish the path. I pressed forward, my hands trembling on the keyboard. The path was barely visible now, swallowed by darkness. The whispers had grown into a deafening roar, and the shadowy figure loomed in the distance, growing larger with each step. Suddenly, the screen went black. I thought it had crashed, but then a message appeared. One word at a time: "You are not alone." The camera shifted, and I saw something horrifying. It was no longer just a game. The screen now displayed my room in real time. The angle was skewed, as if being filmed from the corner of the ceiling. I could see myself sitting there, staring at the screen, my face pale and terrified. Behind me, the shadowy figure stood motionless, its head tilted unnaturally as if observing me. I spun around again, but the room was empty. When I turned back, the figure on the screen was gone. The final message appeared: "Welcome to the path." The game ended abruptly, dumping me back to my desktop. The file was gone, as if it had never existed. I thought it was over, but the next morning, I noticed something strange. My reflection in the bathroom mirror didn't move quite right. When I smiled, it took a fraction of a second too long to smile back. And sometimes, out of the corner of my eye, I catch a glimpse of something standing in the shadows, watching, waiting. If you ever get an invitation to test a game called The Path, don't accept it. No amount of money is worth what it takes. Because once you start the game, you'll never truly finish it. Story 4. Glitch in the Graveyard. The glitch wasn't just a part of the game, it was the game. It started on a boring Saturday afternoon. I was scrolling through an online forum for obscure horror games. I had played just about every mainstream horror title out there and was looking for something different, something unsettling. That's when I came across a thread titled, "Found an Old Game Totally Creepy." The post described a game called Gravebound, claiming it was nearly impossible to find. The user mentioned that the game was pulled from shelves shortly after its release because players reported experiencing disturbing glitches that couldn't be explained. The screenshots were rough. The game looked like it came from the late 90s or early 2000s, with blocky graphics and a dimly lit graveyard setting. Despite the dated visuals, something about the foggy atmosphere and eerie gravestones gave me a weird, sinking feeling. At the bottom of the post was a link to download the game. Against my better judgment, I clicked it. The file downloaded instantly, almost as if it had been waiting for me. When I launched the game, my screen flickered, and a cryptic message appeared. Warning, not all graves should be disturbed. I hesitated, unsure if I should proceed, but curiosity won out, as it always does. I hit enter and the message disappeared. The game began with a first-person view of a graveyard at night. The fog was thick, swirling around the cracked gravestones, and the only sounds were faint whispers and the occasional crunch of gravel underfoot. The first objective appeared in the corner of the screen. Explore the graveyard. Find the keys. It seemed simple enough. As I wandered through the virtual fog, I noticed that every gravestone was labeled with a name and a date. The names appeared random at first: Smith, Johnson, Williams. But then I stumbled across one that made my heart skip a beat. It had my name on it. I froze. The gravestone didn't just have my name, it also displayed my exact birth date. The death date was blank, but the sight of my name etched into a gravestone sent a chill down my spine. I laughed nervously, brushing it off as a creepy Easter egg. Maybe the game pulled data from my computer to personalize the experience. Weird, but not impossible. As I kept playing, the fog thickened and the whispers grew louder. Occasionally, the screen would glitch, showing brief flashes of strange imagery, distorted faces, skeletal hands reaching out of the ground, a pair of glowing red eyes staring directly into the camera. The glitches weren't constant, but they happened just often enough to keep me on edge. After finding the first key, I unlocked a rusted gate that led to another section of the graveyard. The gravestones in this area were more detailed, their names clearer. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The names weren't random anymore. They were people I knew, old classmates, co-workers, distant relatives. All their names were carved into the stones, along with their birth dates. Just like before, the death dates were blank. I tried to convince myself it was a coincidence, but the further I went, the more personal the names became. Friends, neighbors, even my parents' names appeared on the stones. Then I found one that stopped me dead in my tracks. It belonged to my best friend, Alex. His death date wasn't blank. It was listed as today's date. A surge of panic hit me. I grabbed my phone and called Alex. "Hey man, everything okay?" He answered after a few rings. "Yeah, just checking in," I stammered. "Are you home?" "Yeah, just hanging out. Why?" "No reason," I said quickly. "Just had a weird dream about you." We chatted for a few minutes, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I didn't tell him about the game. What could I even say? After we hung up, I stared at the gravestone on the screen. Alex's name, today's date. I tried to quit the game, but there was no option to exit. I even tried shutting off my laptop, but the power button didn't respond. I was trapped. The next objective appeared on the screen. Enter the crypt. Ahead of me was a large stone crypt, its entrance flanked by statues of hooded figures holding scythes. The whispers had grown louder, more insistent. They weren't just background noise anymore, they were saying something. "Don't go," one voice pleaded. "Turn back," another hissed. Ignoring them, I entered the crypt. The inside was cold and claustrophobic, with narrow hallways lined with niches. Each niche had a nameplate, and every name matched someone I knew. I felt a lump in my throat as I moved deeper into the crypt. The walls seemed to close in around me, the air thick with the sound of rasping whispers. Suddenly the screen glitched, and a message appeared. "You shouldn't be here." When the game resumed, my character was standing in front of another gravestone. This one was fresh, the dirt still loose. It had my name on it. But this time the death date wasn't blank. It was listed as tomorrow. My hands started to shake. I wanted to quit the game, to rip the laptop's cord out of the wall, but I couldn't move. My body felt frozen, like the game had me in its grip. The whispers turned into a deafening roar, and the screen began to glitch uncontrollably. Through the distortion, I saw something or someone standing in the crypt's shadows. It was a tall, skeletal figure with glowing red eyes. Its bony hand pointed at me, and a new message appeared on the screen. "Time to dig your grave." The screen went black. I sat there, staring at my reflection in the dark screen, trying to process what had just happened. Then my laptop powered back on by itself. The game was gone, completely erased from my files as if it had never been there. I tried to tell myself it was just a prank, some elaborate piece of interactive horror. But the next morning I woke up to a text message from Alex's sister. Alex had died in his sleep. I felt my stomach drop as I read the message. His name, today's date, the gravestone in the game. It wasn't a coincidence. Since then, I've noticed other names from the game appearing in obituaries. People I recognized, people I had seen carved into those gravestones. Last night, I woke up to find my laptop open, the screen glowing faintly. The game had returned, but the title had changed. It now read, "Play again." I shut the laptop without touching it, but I know it's not over. The graveyard isn't just part of the game, it's real, and my grave is still waiting. Story 5, Level 6, Never Beat It. Everyone told me not to play past Level 5, but curiosity got the best of me. It all started with an urban legend that had been circulating in my gaming community for years. There was this game, an old, obscure horror title called The Harbinger, that supposedly cursed anyone who dared to reach Level 6. The story went that the game had been pulled from stores almost immediately after its release in the early 2000s. Players who made it past Level 5 either vanished, went insane, or ended up in tragic accidents. Of course, no one could prove the legend true, but there were enough whispers, enough missing persons posts tied to players who claimed they'd reached the infamous level to keep the rumors alive. I wasn't superstitious, but I was a sucker for urban legends. When I finally found a copy of the game on a sketchy auction site, I bought it without hesitation. It arrived in a plain, unmarked case. No cover art, no manual, just a disc with the title scrawled on it in faded red ink. When I booted up the game, it didn't waste time with an intro or a menu. It threw me straight into the action. The premise was simple. You were trapped in a crumbling mansion, trying to escape while being hunted by some nameless, shapeless entity. Each level took you deeper into the mansion, and the only way to survive was to solve puzzles and avoid the creature that stalked the halls. The graphics were basic, even for the time. Everything was dark and grainy, with an unsettling, almost claustrophobic atmosphere. But what the game lacked in visuals, it made up for in sound design. The creature's footsteps echoed faintly through the halls, growing louder when it got closer, and when it was near, you could hear it breathing, wet, guttural, and inhuman. The first 5 levels were challenging but manageable. Each one introduced new mechanics and made the puzzles harder. By the time I cleared level 5, I was sweating, my heart racing from the sheer tension of the chase sequences. But as soon as I reached the end of the level, a message appeared on the screen. Warning, level 6 is locked for your safety. Do not proceed. I stared at the message, my curiosity burning. This had to be a marketing gimmick, right? A clever way to play into the urban legend. A prompt appeared below the warning, unlock level 6, YN. I didn't even hesitate. I hit Y. Level 6 was different. The atmosphere shifted as soon as it loaded. The mansion was no longer a maze of hallways and locked doors. Instead, I was in a single, endless corridor that stretched into darkness. The walls were bare, the floor creaked with every step, and the air seemed heavier. There was no music, no ambient noise, just an oppressive silence. As I walked down the corridor, strange things started to happen. The screen would glitch, briefly showing distorted images, a face twisted in agony, a pair of hands clawing at the ground, a shadow that didn't belong to my character. And then I heard it. Footsteps. They didn't come from behind me or ahead of me. They came from inside the game, echoing in a way that made it sound like they were in my room. The corridor seemed endless, but eventually I reached a door at the far end. It was plain and unmarked with no handle or keyhole, just a single word scratched into the wood, enter. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the controller. The game had been tense before, but this felt different. It wasn't just scary, it felt wrong. Against my better judgment, I pushed the door open. On the other side was a room that looked exactly like my own. Same bed, same desk, same cluttered shelves. My heart raced as I moved my character around, exploring every detail. Then I saw it. Sitting on the desk in the game was a monitor. The screen displayed a live feed of me, sitting at my desk playing the game. I froze, my palms sweating. The camera in the game zoomed in, focusing on my face. My reflection on the screen didn't match my expression. While I stared wide-eyed in fear, the reflection smiled, a slow, unnatural grin that didn't belong to me. Suddenly, the room in the game started to change. The walls cracked and bled, the furniture warped and twisted, and the lights flickered violently. The figure on the screen, my reflection, stood up, stepping out of the monitor and into the game world. It tilted its head, staring directly at the camera, and a single line of text appeared on the screen. "I'm coming." The game cut to black, but I could still hear the sound of footsteps. They weren't coming from the game anymore. They were coming from the hallway outside my room. I yanked off my headphones, my pulse pounding in my ears. The footsteps stopped, but I could feel something. A presence, just beyond the door. Summoning every ounce of courage I had, I flung the door open. Nothing. The hallway was empty. I sat back down, my hands shaking, and opened my laptop. The game was gone. The file, the shortcut, even the disc, it was as if they had never existed. For a few days I tried to convince myself it was all in my head, just a vivid imagination and a really well-designed game. But then the dreams started. Every night I found myself back in the endless corridor, hearing those footsteps. And every morning I woke up with scratches on my arms, my neck, my face, as if something was trying to pull me back in. A week after playing the game, I received an email from an unknown sender. The subject line was blank, and the message contained only a single image. A screenshot of level 6, showing the corridor with my gravestone at the center of it. Underneath the gravestone were the words, "You can never leave." I've tried everything, changing my email, getting rid of my computer, even moving to a new apartment. But it doesn't matter. The game won't let me go. Sometimes late at night, I hear those footsteps again, and when I check the mirror, my reflection doesn't always smile the way it's supposed to. If you ever hear about the Harbinger, don't play it. Some levels aren't meant to be beaten, some games aren't meant to end, and some doors should never be opened.